Welcome to another Legacy Warriors podcast. This week we're talking about LFA 220, which goes down in Phoenix, Arizona, and is headlined by Casey Tanner versus Michael Sear. I believe there's 9 or 10 pro fights scheduled for this card. I believe it's 10, but we only have odds for 9 of them. So I will be skipping out on the Delton Kaufman and Caleb Jensen fight as there are no odds anywhere. So I'm not going to bother breaking down a fight that we can't bet on. So no need to waste time on that. Again, 2 quick things here. Go Jays. World Series Game 1 about to kick off in a few short hours here. Very excited about that, getting home field advantage as well. And then secondly, I will probably do a live stream for members only for UFC 321, which kicks off at 10 a.m. Eastern time before this LFA card. LFA actually goes down Saturday night, so it's UFC up first since they're in Abu Dhabi. So if you want to hop in on that good fun, check out the membership below. It's only $2 a month. I'll be doing 2 live streams a week. One talking about the picks, 2 for Fight Day live chat, which I used to do back in the day. Had a lot of fun talking to you guys and hoping to bring that back again. But got to keep some of that negativity and trollish out. And I feel like if you're really invested and want to talk about some fights, $2 a month is nothing to really worry too much about. So check the YouTube membership page. If you just click join right below the video, you'll be able to hit that up. And I hope to see you guys Saturday morning for the UFC 321 picks. It's the culmination of my birthday week, so I'll be getting fucked up the entire stream, and it will be great to chat it up with you guys while doing so as well. All right. Let's get right into this Legacy Warriors podcast. Let's break down this LFA 220 card. First matchup we're going to talk about is Nolan Linebaugh going up against Will Hughes. We got minus 200 on Linebaugh and plus 170 on Hughes. Tough fight to really break down considering that Linebaugh went 8-1 as an amateur, but now makes his pro debut 9 years later. So he's been on the sidelines for quite a long time, I guess primarily focused on his BJJ game. He did defeat, as an amateur, Jose Johnson, former UFC fighter, 12 years ago. And his only loss as an amateur came against the guy that's main eventing this card, Casey Tanner. Again, no relevant tape on him as of late, so it's very tough to tell what we're going to get. And then on the Hughes side of things, he went 6-3 as an amateur. Seems like he prefers the BJJ game considering the purple belt that he brings to the table. Faced some decent competition, but not anything spectacular or special. Why this matchup is being put together makes no sense to me. I'm going to lean Hughes ever so slightly, but even at plus 170, knowing nothing about his opponent, I just don't want to take the plunge there because I don't want to be surprised when this guy comes out as like a Muay Thai specialist and tears Hughes apart on the feet. So I'm going to go Hughes, but no confidence there whatsoever. Another fight that I'm going to have little to no confidence in is this next one here between Jerome Woodbury, who comes in at plus 275, and David Gladfelter, who comes in at minus 335. Now, you want to say 9 years is a long layoff. It's going to be 13 and a half years since Jerome Woodbury stepped foot inside any MMA action. He went 7-1 as an amateur, lost his first fight, and then went on a 7-fight winning streak between 2010 and 2012. I got nothing on this guy. Tapology says he's from Utah. 4 of his 7 wins are coming by knockout, and the other 3 are by submission. His lone defeat came by decision. I believe, it's 3 wins, but I want to say decision. I don't know why it says finish there. Let me just quickly double check that here. Just want to make sure I didn't have a typo on my best predictions poster that I have for LFA 220. Yeah, so it's 4 TKO wins and 3 decision wins for Jerome Woodbury. Again, I know nothing about this guy. Gladfelter, I know a little bit more about. I came across him when he went up against Jake Woodley in his LFA debut back in June. Came up short that night as a big underdog. 6 of his 7 wins coming by submission, so it's obvious that that's where he really wants to go. He showed it off in his last win, which was his which was his win after that Woodley loss. He won in September with a 30-second guillotine choke. He's long, lanky. I think that obviously helps him with the submission game. He has a submission win over former UFC fighter Dylan Budka from 3.5 years ago. So I'm going to go Gladfelter here, but it's tough to really get behind minus 335 when we have no footage on Jerome Woodbury whatsoever. I'm sure he's not been training to have a successful MMA career at this stage of his career, but still, you don't know what he brings to the table and if his BJJ game could be good enough to thwart whatever Gladfelter is going to be sending back his way. So Gladfelter will be the prediction here, but again, similar to the other fight that I talked about, with no film on these guys, I would not recommend ever putting your money blindly on somebody or against somebody that you don't have anything recent of. All right, next up, we got Ribeiro coming in at minus 650, going up against Richard Mahan, who comes in at plus 475. Now, Ribeiro is a BJJ black belt, and he's 4-0 now, with his first 3 wins coming by first-round submission. And then last time around, we saw him have to go 15 minutes against a very scrambly opponent, but he stayed ahead of them and ended up grinding that out and winning it on the scorecards. It's been a while since we've seen him on display, as July 2024 was the last time he competed. He is an MMA lab product. We don't know anything about his striking game because he does such a great job in terms of creating some chaos from jump and then initiating the clinch or the grappling right away and then forcing his opponents to play jiu-jitsu with him for the most part. Pretty dangerous on the ground, but I'm very intrigued by this matchup as he goes up against Richard Mahan, who is a 10th planet BJJ black belt as well. He's 3-1 as a pro. That one loss came against a guy that he couldn't get to the ground, but his toughness and grittiness and durability really showed off that night as he ate some big shots and still stayed in that fight to see the final bell. This guy is a former Marine. He's a guy that, you can tell he's very gritty and he's a real fighter. This guy loves to push a pace. In the grappling realm, he's really fun to watch because he's very good with his scrambles. He doesn't settle for positions for long periods of time. His striking, although not all that technical, as long as he's not facing somebody that has a legitimate striking advantage over him, he can really push the pace and make guys uncomfortable on the feet as he, weaponizes his cardio and his pace. And that's what makes things interesting in this matchup. And I don't understand why Ribeiro, outside of maybe a little bit of name value, as to why he's minus 650. Mahan looks like he should be safe enough on the mat, being a black belt for over 7 years now, and not to mention what I've been seeing in his fights. I'd be kind of surprised if Ribeiro is the one that ends up submitting him. I think Mahan, if he can scramble well enough, continue to not settle for bad positions, and then try to get this fight into the striking realm as often as he can, he should be able to overwhelm Ribeiro and have some major success there. So at plus 475, I think this is a crazy line for a fight that should be priced much closer. Again, we see it time and time again on these LFA cards where we know who the LFA is backing per se, but they still have to go out there and do the damn job. And if Mahan can make this as grindy as I think he can more than likely go out there and actually pull off the victory. So I am going to take a small shot here on Mahan. I'm going to pick him to win. As long as his BJJ black belt holds tough for him early, he should be able to give Ribeiro some trouble and maybe squeeze out a victory of his own by decision here. So very tricky fight, but one that I would not at all suggest parlaying minus 650, considering the threat that Mahan can bring to the table. All right, next up, we got the Battle of the Hernandezes, as we got Leslie Hernandez coming in at minus 450, going up against Flor Hernandez, who comes in at plus 350. Now, Leslie went 4-1 before she stepped into the Contender Series last year and ended up coming up short against Julia Martinez. For Leslie, I'm going to have to keep saying Leslie. I'm so used to using last names that I got to switch it up for this breakdown. But Leslie, normally a striker that, does a good job in terms of sticking and moving, showcasing good footwork. But when she does get taken down, things start to get a little bit iffy. She does have a first line of defensive takedown defense, which is pretty damn good. But it's when opponents really start to chain wrestle and switch things up, diverting the momentum and all that stuff. I think that's what causes Leslie trouble. And luckily for her, Flor doesn't really bring that type of heavy grappling style. She's also a striker at heart as well. And it wouldn't surprise me if Flor looked to get to the grappling, considering the type of success the last few opponents Leslie has gone up against have had. Even Cara Greenwell, who was able to submit Leslie last time. But Flor, not as good. I think Leslie should do a good enough job in terms of sticking and moving, shucking off takedowns, landing more damage on the feet. And I think she ends up winning this fight on the scorecards, but minus 450 is still wide for a fighter of Leslie's skill level. I think she's better than Flor, but you're talking about over 80% indicated. I think that's incorrect, but Flor doesn't instill enough confidence either to warrant a shot on her as a dog. So I'm going to go Leslie and Leslie by decision. All right. Next up, another fun matchup here between Chance Ikei, who comes in at -300, going up against Jordan Burkholder, who comes in at +250. Now, it's interesting because Burkholder used to be the EK of the LFA, right? A guy that the promotion was backing and trying to give some decent competition to so that he can eventually make his way to the Contender Series or the UFC. But after a couple losses, I think he's lost against Josiah Reyes, and then the last time in his LFA action, he came up short against Miguel Sanson, who's a very tough opponent as well. Now, Chance Ikei gets the opportunity to launch off of Burkholder to try to get to that next realm. Ikei, MMA Lab product, 5-0 as a pro, 5-0 as an amateur. He's largely leaned on his grappling to smother his opponents and eventually work to a finish. He has gone to a decision, which is good because it shows off that his cardio issues are not as bad as I thought they were earlier. But again, that was a fight where he was kind of able to just dictate the pace of the fight and fight at his own style so that he can conserve his energy well enough. Strong wrestler, good top control. Now it's all about seeing if he can do it against better competition. And that's exactly what he's fighting here with Jordan Burkholder, who is a Jackson Wink representative, a guy that's a very solid wrestler in his own right and has used that to be quite successful throughout his career. He's 1-2 in the LFA. His one win was a second round submission victory, but his two losses, like I said, was against Josiah Reyes, who he was unable to get to his grappling enough. Reyes was much taller, much longer, better striker, and he was able to land more damage. And then Miguel Sanson, he enjoyed a ton of control time against Sanson, but Sanson was the one getting off on damage while Burkholder was looking to actually just grapple. But I think that was a good learning lesson for Burkholder, and I still think he has a pretty high ceiling considering how young he is still in his MMA career. We saw him go 25 minutes against a middling MMA veteran last time around to win a regional title. I believe it was for Front Street Fights. But again, I think he's very talented and he's being very much overlooked here because of the two losses he has on his record, but also the undefeated run that Ikei has had throughout his career. I'm going to go with the dog. I'm going to go with Burkholder. I think on paper, he is the better wrestler, and I think he can put on a pace and pressure on Ikei that Ikei is not used to going up against. Whenever Ikei found himself in trouble in fights, he would utilize his physicality and his grappling to work out of those bad spots, but that's not going to be on the table for him here. Burkholder is the better wrestler, and even if Ikei does land a takedown, Burkholder should be able to reverse that position or work back to his feet pretty quickly and then get back to the pressure style that has made him successful in his career. So unless Ikei clips him with a big shot or something like that, and if this fight ends up going to the scorecards, I think that Burkholder has a pretty damn good chance of getting his hand raised here. So I'm going to go Burkholder to pull off the upset and win this fight on the scorecards. All right, next up, we got the first Natividad brother that's competing on this card, throwing down, as we have Kevin Natividad coming in at +120, going up against Ryan Hughes, who comes in at -140. Now, Kevin is a former UFC fighter who had a 5-fight winning streak going into his UFC debut in October of 2020. Unfortunately, he went 0-3 in the UFC, most recently going to a split decision loss against Ricky Turcios. It was a fight that could have gone either way, but it seemed like the squirminess of Turcios really caused Natividad issues. Now, early in Natividad's career, he used to use a grapple-heavy approach. When he got to the UFC, he started leaning on his striking a little bit more, and that got him into some trouble. We saw him try to get to his grappling against Turcios, but Turcios is just too slimy of a fighter to hold down in bad positions, and Natividad fell victim to that. He has some good power in his shots. He has a decent all-around game, and I think we'll see him try to lean on what got him to the dance in the first place, and that's going to be his grapple-heavy style, and that is obviously going to come into play here against Ryan Kuse, who is a smothering specialist himself. It's been over a year and a half since he's been in action. The last time we saw him in action, he went up against eventual UFC signee Cameron Smotherman. He lost by split decision that night, but that was a very close fight where his grappling was being outdone by the slight damage work of Smotherman, who was often on the defensive side of things throughout that matchup. it is impressive what Kuse was able to do. Even though he hasn't fought in MMA for over a year and a half, he did compete for Karate Combat back in July, and he knocked his opponent out, a guy he had already beaten in bare knuckle MMA just 2 years prior. He's a goat shed guy, and I think that's largely why he competed for Karate Combat when he got the chance. But again, I don't know how much he's been training with goat shed recently, considering we know that goat shed is not as prominent as they used to be. I find myself leaning with Natividad. I think that his grappling should help him enough here against Hughes. And then when they're in the striking realm, I think that Natividad is the better striker. I think that could either lead to Natividad hurting and finishing Hughes, or nullifying the control and wrestling of Hughes with those big shots from Natividad, and that should be enough for him to win on the scorecards as well. So at the current line, I really expected Natividad to be the favorite considering his UFC resume and experience, but I think people are saying that he went 0-3 and maybe believe that he didn't deserve to be at that level in the first place, but I think that's not the right line of thinking. I think just on paper, as skill for skill and what these guys bring to the table, I think Natividad is the better fighter, and it will ultimately be his striking advantage that gets him the win here. So give me Natividad either late KO or by decision. All right. Next up, we got veteran Kyle Estrada coming in at plus 165, going up against Ernesto Ibarra, who comes in at minus 190. Now, Estrada is a veteran from the Phoenix area, so it makes sense as to why he is on this card. He represents Fight Ready. He's 14-8 as a pro. I'd say his best round was between 2017 and 2019 when he went 7-1 with his only loss coming against Luis Smoka, who eventually made it back to the UFC after that. But since that fight, he is now 4-4, dating back to 2019. When he started off that run with a 2-fight losing streak against Adrian Yanez and then Kevin Natividad. He's a well-rounded fighter, solid striking, good pace, a reliable grappling game if he has enough of an edge against his opponent. But at 35 years old, I think things will start to slow down even more as he faces legitimate competition. He did fight for Bellator, where he went 1-1 between 2016 and 2018. But at this stage in his career, I think he's more so just fighting in front of friends and family than trying to actually make it to the next level. Now, he's going up against Ernesto Ibarra, who is a very close training partner of recent UFC signee Imanol Rodriguez, and that was that friendship actually pushed Ibarra to train from, Bang Tao in Thailand to actually moving over to Ikei and training alongside Rodriguez, even at Daniel Cormier's new training camp as well that he started up. I think it's called the Academy or something like that. He's a decent striker. We've seen him outstrike guys. We've seen him outgrapple guys. We've seen him get outgrappled. But I think that time that he got outgrappled against Martin Davila only in the first round was a little bit of a surprise for Ibarra. But it was a little bit concerning that he wasn't able to work back to his feet. Luckily, in the second and third rounds, he was able to fend off the takedowns and get off with the striking to eventually get his win there. He's largely fought for a Kombachi Global, which is not a bad promotion in terms of facing legitimate competition to get ready for the next level. And I feel like Ibarra is closer to his prime than Estrada. Estrada has a good enough game that he might be able to cause Ibarra some trouble, but if Ibarra's takedown defense holds up as well as we know it can, I think that Ibarra is the more dangerous and better striker, and that could either lead to Ibarra getting a late finish or winning this fight on the scorecards. At minus 190, though, it's hard to fade Estrada at that number with a guy that's still looking to prove himself, but I do think Ibarra eventually proves himself and then outstrikes Estrada and wins this fight on the scorecards. All right, co-main event now with the second Natividad brother, as we have Christian Natividad coming in at minus 1,200, going up against Justin Quilca, who comes in at plus 750. Now, Natividad is going for his second win of 2025 and looks to add to his unblemished 7-0 record. He is a power striker that does a great job in terms of picking his spots and letting go with those big shots, showing that he can go 50 minutes with that type of pace and still get the win. And if he feels that it's a little bit too tricky to strike with his opponent, he'll go to the grappling, where he's a very good scrambler, very good wrestler, and very good top controller, which makes him pretty much a very well-rounded threat. I think he's the better brother between him and Kevin, and I think it's just a matter of time before Christian punches his ticket to the next level. He even has a win over Israel Galvin, and considering the run that Galvin is currently on right now, that's a very respectable win for Natividad. He has been somewhat inconsistent at a certain part of his career, but he's really starting to pick it up now, and I think that's going to help him get to the next level. And I think he has a very favorable matchup here against Justin, who pretty much has been beaten up on bums on the Latin America scene. He's put together an 8-fight winning streak with all but one of those wins coming by finish. He largely looks to ground his opponents and try to submit him. He loves the heel hook, but I don't think that'll work out for him at this level. He's very reckless on the feet, throws wide-winging hooks, doesn't really have a lot of technique there either. It's all about just out-muscling his opponents on the mat, and considering the level of opponents he was going up against, it's very easy for him to do that as well. Facing very low-level competition throughout his career. His record looks good on paper, but again, once you really dig into it, things start to get a little bit shady and sketchy, and I think that only plays into Natividad's favor. I love Natividad here, and although he hasn't finished many fights recently, I feel like this is a matchup for him to go out there and do it pretty emphatically against a guy that has way too many holes in his game. So look for Natividad to find the finish here within a round and a half. I know the total is set at 2.5, and I wouldn't mind taking the under there, but I think this is a very, very winnable matchup, and one that Natividad can look very good in to get noticed by the higher-ups. So give me Natividad inside the distance. All right, that brings us to the main event now between Casey Tanner, who comes in at minus 500 going up against Michael Sear, who comes in at plus 375. Now, Tanner is a fight-ready prospect who came up short on the Contender Series back in 2023 against a very tough opponent in Gene Matsumoto, who was able to outstrike him and pretty much out-MMA him and win that fight on the scorecards. Since then, Tanner has gone on a 2-fight winning streak with both of those wins coming inside the LFA, and he's done a good job in terms of implementing his style effectively and coming out on top. He's a great wrestler, and I think that's kind of helped him bail him out of some bad spots, specifically in his last fight against Urena, I believe the opponent's name was. He found himself in some bad spots, but got back to his wrestling, and that saved him from getting finished, or at least saved him from getting broken. His striking is starting to come up. It's definitely getting better, but he is best when he can get to his wrestling and smother opponents. And he can work to finishing positions if he has a good enough advantage there against his opponents. Now he's going up against Michael Sear, who's 1-1 with the LFA back in 2022. He returned to the local show, and that saw him put together a 4-fight winning streak. 2 of them against low-level opponents and 2 against mediocre opponents. He finished them all by submission, adding to his total of 7 of his 8 wins coming by submission. The only other win came by a 29-second knockout. His last fight was against Sean McPadden in the LFA, and that was a fight where he got submitted. He put on a solid pace early, but then eventually started to fold and slow in the second round, and that's where McPadden really started to pick it up. He dropped Sear and eventually submitted him midway through that second round. And I think that's where Sear starts to struggle. If he can't get to his grappling game, and if he can't set a pace against a guy that doesn't have a good enough striking game, he really starts to struggle. And I think that's where Tanner will really start to throw off his dominance here. And I think this could be a spot for Tanner to actually pick up a finish. The under 2.5 is at a pretty good plus money line that I wouldn't mind shooting on, where I think Tanner will look to utilize his wrestling defensively and then really just pressure Sear with power punches, forward pressure, and not allowing Sear to get to any comfortable positions. Like I said, I think this leads to Tanner getting that finish. Probably comes in the second round as Sear starts to slow down and break. And I think this will be a pretty emphatic statement that Tanner makes to try to get back to the Contender Series or break back into the UFC. I'm going to go Tanner inside the distance, but the under 2.5 is what I would like most here. There you guys go. LFA 220 broken down in its entirety for you guys. I do have a few track plays already posted on the MMA LOT and Patreon page, so make sure you guys check that out if that's what you're interested in. Otherwise, make sure you guys check out the prop drop, which I'm going to drop later on this evening. And then again, tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Eastern time, prelims for UFC 321. I may be streaming for it, so make sure you guys hop on by the channel if you want to join up. And yeah, can't wait. I'll hopefully see you guys on the stream tomorrow. Peace.